Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome here to For Trade Weekly webinar. Today's topic is French election. So, if you have any questions during the webinar, just go ahead and type them into the question box. But first, before we start, please read this risk disclaimer. At Fortrade, you trade contracts for different CFDs. I want to highlight three key points here. Trading CFDs and other leveraged products carry a high level of risk to your capital as prices may move rapidly against you. You can lose all, but not more than the balance on your trading account. CFDs may not be suitable for all clients, therefore ensure you understand the risks and seek independent advice if you need it. You can find this full risk disclosure statement on the Fortrade website. So let's go ahead and start with this webinar. So today's topic will be covered in our webinar will be first round of presidential election in France, a short review, and then what to expect from the second round. Does actually Le Pen have a chance to win French presidency? And finally, how the markets will react and what we can actually expect. So in days France, for the first time, neither of two mainstream parties made the second round of presidential election. In their place on May the 7th, Emmanuel Macron, former socialist economy minister, who left the party to run for the presidency, and Marine Le Pen will face off. In the first round of presidential election, which took place on April 23rd this year, Macron won many departments. This is something like counties that went socialist in 2012. Le Pen, by contrast, made most of her gains in the heartlands of the central right. Both were aided by poor performance of the candidates from those parties. Macron ultimately won 33 departments and territories that current President François Hollande had won in 2012, while Le Pen picked up 30 that had gone to Union for Popular Movement, now Republicans, candidate Nicolas Sarkozy. France has 96 mainland departments plus several overseas departments and territories. While while French voters didn't shock markets by sending both presidential candidates for the far left and far right to the deceived second round in 2 weeks, investors did not get their dreams lined up. A contest between Emmanuel Macron and François Fillon, the two most pro-market candidates. Instead, the runoff between National Front Marine Le Pen and Macron, the individual possibility to which the market assigned of the highest single probability involves a clear battle between a commitment to shake the economic system and one to create change within existing structure. And this first round vote doesn't signal, at least not yet, the end of the anti-establishment phenomenon. So does Le Pen have a chance of winning the French presidency? Centrist Emmanuel Macron is a long way ahead in the polls. So, is there any way far-right leader Marine Le Pen could still pull off a shock victory in France's presidential election on May the 7th? Since his impressive first-round victory, Mr. Macron is still at least 20 points ahead, which sounds as an unquestionable lead. The signs look good for him too. He won 8,657,326 votes in the first round, almost a million more than his National Front runner-up. And the polls also suggested many voters from the other main candidates are likely to back him in the second round. He has also a strong backing from key political figures, ongoing Socialist President François Hollande, a candidate Benoit Hamon on the left, and defeated Republican candidate François Fillon, as well as ex-President Nicolas Sarkozy on the right. So, what could go wrong for him? Political analysts agree that the biggest threat is potential abstention. If there is a very big turnout for Macron and very strong support for Le Pen, she could go above 50 of the vote. So, could apathy win Le Pen the vote? Marine Le Pen does not even need to go above 50% in the polls to become president. According to some, as long as Macron voters stay away in a big enough numbers. All she needs is to advance a little more in the polls, and this is how she could do it. Some analysts say that if she gets 42% of the vote, which isn't impossible, and Macron gets 58%, normally she loses election. But if 90% of people who said that they would vote for Le Pen do it, and at the same time, only 65% of people who delegate actually who declared that they would vote for Macron actually do it, then it's Marine Le Pen who wins the election with a score of 50.07%. Whether or not the polls might fail, it is worth pointing out here that almost all polling organizations were keenly accurate in predicting where the top six candidates would finish. Markets relying around Macron as Frexit off the table. As the results started coming on Sunday night after the first round, the euro jumped 2%. It was its highest level since 10th November, the day after the results of US presidential election. The euro eased back later on Monday. The move left sterling down 1.3% against the euro at 1.17, while the pound dropped 0.2% versus US dollar at 1.27. The extent of the market reaction shows how nervous investors were, worried that the actual polls would deliver another shock results. France CAC 40 share index closed 4% up, while German DAX was 3.37% up. The CAC's gain took it to its highest level since the financial crisis of 2008. In London, the FTSE 100 share index ended 2% ahead. In the US, the Nasdaq gained 1.2% to finish the day at 5,983.82. The Dow Jones and S&P 500 indices both rose 1.1%. Japanese Nikkei 225 was up around 0.4% in the morning trade, while South Korean Kospi had increased 0.1%. In France, shares in Société Générale and Crédit Agricole jumped 9.86% and 10.86% respectively. In London, Barclays rose 5.4% and Standard Chartered added 4.75%. Germany's DAX broke through 12,400 points for the first time, led high by Commerzbank and Deutsche Bank. In the US, JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs were those biggest risers, gaining 3.5 and 3% respectively. Although counterfactuals are essentially tricky, let's start the market analysis by discussing what probably will not happen. So, risks assets and the spreads on French and peripheral bonds will avoid the volatility sell-off that they surely would have experienced had Le Pen and Jean-Luc Mélenchon, a far-left candidate, made it to the second round. With that, there will be significantly less risk of destabilizing capital flows of the French banking system. At the same time, markets will not experience the extreme joy that would have resulted from the opposite outcome, a Fillon-Macron second round. So what can we expect if Macron wins? The initial market reaction to the actual outcome, similar to the very competitive first round, should be positive for risk assets and euro, though not necessarily cheerful. The extent of the rally depends on what the final numbers say about the strength of Le Pen's showing, especially now that both Fillon and Benoit Hamon, the Socialist Party candidate who was badly defeated, have rushed to throw their support behind Macron for the May 7th runoff. Looking ahead, and based on the widespread conventional view that the majority of the French electorate will again seek to vote for any alternative to the National Front, most market participants will likely assume that when push comes to shove, Macron will be elected president, even though he lacked a political party and now faces the prospects of being pressed much harder on the policy position and past actions. If this scenario were to be realized, markets would do more than avoid an upfront shock. They also would take France off the list of possible sources of systemic shock. If mainstream French candidate is elected, European stock could be poised for big gains, given recent improvements in European economy and corporate earnings. The immediate sign of relief would be experienced well beyond markets. Two central banks, the ECB, European Central Bank, and the Swiss National Bank, would be able to shelve plans to stabilize markets through exceptional measures in order to avoid wild moves in the currencies, at least for now. The Greek government would feel slightly more confident about the possibility of avoiding a debt cliff in the summer, though it still needs to resolve differences between the International Monetary Fund and European partners. And Germany would be less concerned about being forced further into anchoring the Eurozone subject to growing forces of fragmentation. With relief, some investors may be tempted to go further and interpret the results as indication that the wave of anti-establishment sentiment that delivered Brexit and the Donald Trump presidency has dissipated, allowing markets to set aside consideration of political and geopolitical risks in a more significant manner, but that would be premature, including when it comes to France, for two related reasons. Not all uncertainty in France has been lifted. Even if Macron prevails in the second round, the country's political system still has to deal with the fallout from the marginalization of mainstream parties in the presidential race that is unlikely to extend to the legislative elections that are scheduled for June. Some form of cohabitation, which is actually a government made up of president from one party and prime minister from another, will have now emerged, which is far from a straightforward proposition. Although an immediate extreme outcome has been avoided, there is no denying that this is another example of an event deemed improbable not so long ago become reality. Remember, few initial took seriously Macron's notion of getting to the second round, as he was powered by a movement rather than a party. Questions remain, though markets understandably will be relieved by the outcome of this first round. A potential bullet has been avoided and absent an anticipation shock, the markets already expect the second one to be avoided in the next round of voting. But it is way too early to declare an end to the anti-establishment phenomena that has turned improbables, if not unthinkables, into realities. So what if Marine Le Pen wins? Le Pen has said that if elected, She will hold a referendum to take France out of the EU, leaving the euro currency and the Schengen travel zone, a passportless free travel zone of 26 European countries, have also been Le Pen consistent promises. If that happens, it would be a shock for EU that may rush its end, because unlike the United Kingdom that has announced to leave EU after the successful referendum of the issue, France is founder member of the EU and formed the Union in 1951 along with Germany, Italy, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. Other countries joined it later on. If Le Pen wins, that can seriously hurt euro. In equity markets, attention will be likely turned first to France benchmark CAC 14 stock index, which has climbed roughly 4% this year. Its listed companies source 26 of revenue from France and 61 from Europe as a whole. Foreign-based investors own a large share of French debt, holding around 60% of government bonds. If they flee, France's borrowing costs would likely climb, hitting French companies and the wider economy. While estimates vary, analysts predict a roughly 5 up to 10% fall in the Eurozone equities if the event of Le Pen victory. Some believe that while US equities could also initially sell off, the declines would be much smaller and stock would likely quick rebound, much as they did 2 days after the Brexit vote. To be sure, investors point to several major hurdles between Mrs. Le Pen's election and so-called Frexit. She would need support from the French Prime Minister to call a referendum on euro membership, which is unlikely unless she also wins a preliminary majority. Around two-thirds of the French population still supports the euro. So let's look at the calendar of the election. On Sunday, May 7th, polls will open at 8 a.m. and will be closed at 8 p.m. local GMT plus 2 time. The winner is likely to be known within hours, but the swearing-in ceremony actually does not take place until several days after the election. On Sunday, June 11th, the presidential will be followed by parliamentary elections, 2 rounds of voting on consecutive Sundays, 11th and 18th June, which will have significant bearing on what the new president can achieve. In 2012, Hollande's Socialist Party won 280 seats, slightly short of an outright majority in the 577 seats Assemblée Nationale. So, the intrigue. The new president, France's third inside a decade, faces perhaps the most formidable intrigue of any. Security will top the agenda, with the emphasis on how to stop the volley of terrorist attacks that have killed more than 230 people in the country in past 18 months. The economy comes a close second. Figures from French GDP growth for the first quarter 2017 are due to be released shortly before the second round vote and should show that the modest recovery continues, that it is geographically patchy and fitful and seems to be having a little effect on an unemployment rate that persists stubbornly above 10%. The new president will be a key figure also in shaping Brexit talks and will also be instrumental in defining the all-important Franco-German relationship in the heart of the EU. So now would be a good time if you have, this is the end of our webinar. So if you have any questions, now would be a good time for you to just write it in the question box. All right, nothing? Okay, maybe the next time. We now reached the end of our time here. Just want to wish you all the best luck in your trading and have a great week. Talk to you soon. Bye now.